the most exciting thing I'd ever done. And it became very clear to me, having had a class in high school in my Mesoamerican archaeology, that we didn't know very much about these cultures. Yeah. And it was a great career. And so I chose the University of Pennsylvania because they were coming off of a 19-year project at Tikal, Guatemala. And they had started a new project at Tayasal in Guatemala, which was the last Maya site. And I figured I'd be able to go on it since it only had 1 year. And
but the trick is most folks don't take undergraduate students on these projects, which is why to this day we always bring undergraduates with us, because we believe it's a transformative experience. Wow. They're not necessarily all going to be archaeologists, but the experience itself we think is incredibly important.
Coming up on the Best of Hello Houston, we will find out about the nation's first fully robotic heart transplant with Baylor St. Luke's Medical Center's Dr. Kenneth Lau. This is News 88.7.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from the Elizabeth D. Rockwell Center on Ethics and Leadership, presenting How to Break Up with Your Phone, a lecture with author Catherine Price on September 18th at the University of Houston. More at uh.edu/hobby. 25-26 season features a Schubert Perspectives series, jazz with Branford Marsalis and Pat Metheny, and much more. Information and tickets at Decamera.com.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on today's topics, call or text 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. And now here's Celestia Sherman and special guest host Doug Miller.
Today, we have news of a medical milestone from right here in the heart of Houston. For the first time on an adult patient, the nation's first fully robotic heart transplant here in the city that pioneered heart transplants in our country. The feat was performed at Baylor St. Luke's Medical Center, and leading the team that performed this surgery was Dr. Kenneth Lau, the chief of cardiothoracic transplantation, who guided this groundbreaking surgery. This procedure used tiny incisions, which meant that there was less trauma and a faster recovery for the 45-year-old patient suffering from advanced heart failure. Joining us to discuss this is Dr. Lau himself. Dr. Lau, congratulations. What a feat.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and to discuss this milestone achievement for us and for the patient too.
It is remarkable. It is truly remarkable. So let me tell you what I think a lot of people listening to this program right now have in mind. They're thinking of the Jetsons. They're thinking of Rosie the robot, or they're thinking of the robot from Lost in Space waving its arms around. That's not exactly what it was. Tell us how this procedure looked.
So this is the fourth generation robot. We use intuitive surgical robot, and there's a medical robot. It's composed of multiple arms, small arms, with a diameter about 8 millimeter, and the instrument tip is composed of 3 millimeter instrument like scissors, needles, holder, grasper. So that allow us to perform fine procedures inside patient's chest and without split open the entire breastbone. And with regard to the heart, the big, sick heart, how we get it out, we actually made an incision about above the umbilical button, about 5-inch incision underneath the breastbone, and behind the breastbone, once the old heart is cut out, we pull it out from that space. It's called pre-peritoneal space, and then insert the new heart into the pericardial sac through the same space, and then use the robotic instruments through, sewed it together, vessel by vessel.
So,
and it was amazing technology.
I was going to say, so Dr. Lau, besides the less trauma to the patient's body, what are some of the other clinical benefits of this type of robotic heart transplant surgery? Because you talked about you didn't have to necessarily split open that chest, and that's a lot of trauma, so you're omitting that. But what are the other benefits?
The other benefit is this robotic instrument allow us to make very fine movement, fine suturing, in a very small space and no more gentle. And then the robot can filter out the tremors and unwanted movement. So only that fine movement can happen. And also the image visualization is 10 times magnified field with 3D scope. Basically, we're looking at 3D picture 10 times bigger than native eyes. So every single small vessel, small bleeder, will see it very carefully. And the instrument placement is very accurate, probably more accurate than the naked eye and the conventional ways. That's why this, I think this is amazing, like with regard technology, is very fine move in addition to all the benefits of preserving the patient's chest wall integrity.
So when you say fully robotic, we use the term fully robotic, did you have any contact at all with the robot, or did you just stand back and look and let the robot do its thing?
So actually, with fully robot means all the contact that the patient's heart is in, there's no moment with my hand, it's all through the robotic arms and then hands robotic. So I'm sitting about probably 5 feet away from the patient on the OR table in the same room. I'm operating this instrument through a computer console. Everything's done through a computer console, control the robotic arms at the patient's bedside. Yes, that is that's called fully robotic in a way, but not 100%. In the future, of course, with AI, with machine learning, with technology advancement, I can see one day we just program it, and then the robot will do the whole thing. So
Dr. Lau, I want you involved if my card hit that the robot's there.
You're hired.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Dr. Lau, when you were in med school studying medicine, is this something you ever even fathomed could happen?
No. I was interested in the heart transplant, and then that was at the beginning, the 70s, 80s, that when the heart transplant is started. So everybody excited, it's a new technology, new treatment that treat end-stage heart disease. Now finally it is, in the 80s, there's some heart transplant can help. So, but never realized this like robot would come in and to help out. And of course, this is technology, is converging technology. We're doing a lot of robotic surgeries nowadays on heart. We can operate on the heart, mitral valve, aortic valve, all the valves, the bypass surgery. So we are doing this surgery daily and a very high frequency at the hospital, in the St. Luke's Hospital. So it's very natural to see this coming, and this technology and surgical expertise converge together to make it happen here.
Your patient, 45 years old. Was there any reluctance on the part of this patient when you said we're going to use a robot to perform a heart transplant?
No, actually, he is very into this because he's been stuck in the ICU bed for over 3 months. He had all these medical devices inserted through his neck, through his groin to support his heart, and his heart required multiple devices to keep it going. He's very weak. He had previously had a stroke, so he wanted something down to him that he can go quickly, recover, get out of bed, stand up, start walking. So then that we offer this robot technology without open chest. He's really right jump onto it. Of course, we told him if the robotic didn't pan out, we can still resort back to a conventional way. But he said he wants to go with robot with minimally invasive approach.
How's he doing?
Doing wonderful. He's already back to normal life. He stayed in the hospital for about 4 weeks, and then after that, he's gone, just totally free.
And how typical was his medical condition? I mean, is this something that can be done regularly, or does it have to be a very specific type of situation of heart disease?
So gradually, I think we'll do the more frequently now, since we know this can be done safely and efficiently in the patient like this. So of course, this patient didn't have previous open heart surgeries. The scar was not that intense inside the chest. And also he has a big fading heart, and the huge heart allows different heart size, different donor heart to fit in more easily. And then, of course, the donor is from the local hospital. We have a good control about the timing. So all this has helped out. But long-term, if you're looking towards future, I think we can gradually do more and more this kind of surgery, and more people will benefit from this. So actually, in our hospital, we're looking at future, and then to set up a protocol to do more transplant like this, and hopefully in a year or two, we're making it a routine for majority of the patients.
Dr. Lau, this would not have been possible had it not been for a donor heart. Can you talk for a moment about the importance of that? How long did this man wait for a heart?
This man waited for heart for over 3 months in the ICU. So the blood type is one thing, and his condition and has to be in patient's donor. We have to find perfect donor, blood type, tissue typing, size, weight, and the distance, and a lot of factors put into this. So we have a great team, and day and night working on this, looking for the best candidate, best donors, and also probably the local Houston is fortunately is an area that a lot of donations happen, and of course nowadays we have technologies using different type of donor. In the old days we use brain death heart, the donor for the heart transplantation. Now we have the donor from cardiovascular arrest, the heart arrested donor. It's called DCD donor. That actually increased our heart transplant volume by 30%. So technology and then the new concept of donation has helped increase the donor pool and benefit a lot of patients.
Well, this is an opportunity for us to put the word out over the airwaves. If you're not signed up to be an organ donor, maybe it's a good idea to look into that, because someone out there saved a man's life. And so did you, Dr. Lau. And so we appreciate your having us, joining us today. Dr. Kenneth Lau, the Chief of Cardiothoracic Transplantation at Baylor St. Luke's Medical Center. Dr. Lau, thanks for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is the Best of Hello Houston on News 88.7. I'm Jim Kovacic, the executive producer of the show. And just a quick reminder, you can listen to our live Hello Houston show weekdays from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. on News 88.7. Coming up on the Best of Hello Houston, Thomas Billy, executive chef and owner of Belly of the Beast, won Best Chef Texas at the 2025 James Beard Awards. And he'll tell us why. Next, this is News 88.7.
Councilmember Edward Pollard stepped up to identify funds to support public media in Houston.
Today, I'm excited to announce a contribution of $50,000 each to two pillars of our public broadcasting landscape, KTSU and Houston Public Media.
Councilman Pollard joins thousands who recognize the value of fact-based, non-biased journalism, high-quality educational content, and emergency alert communications. Learn how you can help at HoustonPublicMedia.org.
Public media belongs to all of us, but it only survives when we all step up.
With federal funds for public media cut, Houston Public Media has launched its Resiliency Fund. This is your chance to take a stand for independent journalism in Houston.
This is your moment to protect what matters to you. Now is the time to act.
Be part of this bold step forward. Support the Resiliency Fund at HoustonPublicMedia.org/donate or call 888-909-0887.
And now back to Hello Houston. Call now, 713-440-8870, or email us at talk@hellohouston.org to get your comment in on today's topics. Here's Ernie Manous, Celeste Diaz-Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
Belly of the Beast is a Houston area restaurant in spring known for its menu, which has been described as new American seen through the lens of a first-generation Mexican-American. Last month, Thomas Billy, executive chef and owner of Belly of the Beast, won Best Chef Texas at the 2025 James Beard Award, one of Texas restaurant industry's highest honors. With us now to tell us more about receiving this honor and his restaurant's story is Chef Thomas Billy of Beauty and the Beast. Thomas, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me on.
I was just joking with you before we started about a friend and I drove by a restaurant that was for rent, and we were like, oh, we should do that. Restaurant business, so easy.
Oh, super easy.
Super easy. It is such a chore to not just get a restaurant open, to keep it open, and then to be successful, and then to be recognized. What's the secret sauce for you?
Honestly, it's believing in your work. You know, it's staying true to yourself and just try to stand out and not do what everybody else is doing. That's just kind of been our formula over there. We stay in our own lane and we continue to do what we do. I don't really like look at other restaurants and what they're doing. I mean, I go eat at other restaurants, but I don't. Sure. I don't like say like, oh, this guy's doing this certain type of cuisine or this certain dish. Maybe I should do a riff on it.
So know
like,
thyself.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, when people see that genuineness from you, they actually will believe in it as well. You know, our community is great up there. So
being true to yourself, what can people expect and see where Thomas Billy comes from, or in your food? What inspires your menu? And you know, to get this type of recognition, this honor, what does it mean to you?
So, well, first and foremost, to win this is I'm still processing it. I know it's been a couple of weeks already, but it's validating. You know, it's I had imposter syndrome for so long, and I still kind of do a little bit. But you know, when you work for other restaurants and when you work under people, you create these menus for them and dishes, and you are kind of in the shadow, right? You don't ever really get recognition for it or anything like that.
Belly of the Beast. How did you come up with a name for that for your restaurant?
And before you say that, even though you are our guest and we want you to be our guest, I think in the intro I called it Beauty and the Beast. Just autopilot there, Belly of the Beast. Thank you.
So Belly of the Beast is a name. You know, obviously it means like you're in the thick of it. So when I used to run a restaurant at the hotel, we used to be very busy. And I would scream, like yell out during service, like, we're in the belly of the beast now.
So I looked at your website. I can't wait to come to your restaurant. The presentation is beautiful. I think that's such a part of dining, is when the food just on the plate looks like art. That's got to be half of what you're doing up there?
Well, you know, you eat with your eyes first, right? Yeah. So that's always a thing. It's been part of my career and my training. So we just kind of make sure everything looks nice.
Well, you know, so many dishes, especially, and I love Mexican food. Yeah. But when I order 3 enchiladas and rice and beans, I pretty much know what it's going to look like when it gets there. But your dishes just continue to be amazing.
Thank you, appreciate that.
So when we're looking at something that we were talking about earlier, is, you know, like you said, you sometimes, and I think like many people, when they get these types of recognitions, they have a little bit of that imposter syndrome.
Right.
But you were telling us that you still work on the line in the kitchen.
I very much so do. I feel if someone's going to come to the restaurant, and it is also like something I read and heard Marco Pierre White say, is Marco Pierre White's a great chef, a legend. He had 3 stars, and then he gave them back to Michelin. Wow. You know, because he wanted a balance of life, wanted to raise his children and stuff like that. So, but he also said that, like, you could do 1 of 3 things, right? You live a lie, and you're no longer behind the stove and you hire people to cook for you, or 2, you kind of just tell your soul, or 3, like he had a criteria, right? But that kind of stuck with me. And it's like, yeah, you know, people are coming here. My food is very personal. It's a lot of it. It's my upbringing. Just growing up in the neighborhood I grew up in, like just being able to kind of like mesh those flavors.
Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Los Angeles, in Mid-City, LA. And a very diverse neighborhood. My street alone probably had like 6 or 7 different ethnicities. And I grew up smelling those smells and eating that food at a very young age, left a huge imprint on me. So when I think about food, I'm thinking about how can I elevate food, right? So, for example, my mother used to make these tacos dorados de papa y queso, right? Like, so, you know, it's like a crispy taco that you fold over and you fry. It's got a potato and cheese mix, right? So I was like, how can I elevate that? How can I go from lowbrow to highbrow? Mm-hmm. So we created these empanadas, right? And we make pommes à la go, which is a French mashed potato dish that you fold in cheese until it's goopy. So it's like, you know.
You didn't bring any?
Yeah, so Comté cheese.
Goopy, we're there for you.
Yeah, so, you know, and then we use that to fill the empanadas. We fry them and we serve them with like creme fraiche and caviar, you know. And
Talking about
Empanadas with creme fraiche and caviar.
Talking about prepping foods too, and when you talk about the merge of different cuisines or different flavors, for you, what's the secret to getting that right?
it's honestly, I don't believe in the word fusion. It's if I'm gonna make a curry, I'm gonna make a curry. You know, it's gonna have, like if it's a Thai curry, right? It's gonna have fish sauce. It's gonna have shrimp paste. It's gonna have heat. You know, coconut milk and stuff like that.
Fusion is like you ran out of ingredients.
Exactly. It's kind of like I don't really merge it. So like if you're tasting, for example, like the curry that I mentioned, right? I'm gonna use Mexican ingredients, but the end result when you're tasting it, you close your eyes, you're like, hey, this is a Thai green curry.
You're still gonna celebrate.
Yeah, exactly.
What are the challenges these days? But we were just talking about lease issues and tariffs and personnel. How are you doing?
We're doing well, fortunately.
Good.
Yeah.
But, you know, we started off very bumpy, you know. For this iteration, right, we opened originally in Old Town Spring in 2020, 5 weeks before the pandemic.
Love Old Town.
Great timing, I know. But we were actually very successful, right? We got a good following. We got some good write-ups. But it was a building that had very old problems and stuff. So when it rained, we'd lose power. Our backyard would flood. So we quickly outgrew it. So when my lease was up, I decided we're not going to renew this. You know, let's push pause. I did some consulting in the city for other restaurants. And then I gave a year commitment. And then from that year, I did pop-ups to open this restaurant.
Well, the James Beard Award is probably going to help carry you a little bit.
So, you know.
And I mentioned for Michelin.
Yeah. So, you know, the bib actually has been carrying us for a good time. And then you get a semi-finalist nomination, so then you get another wave. Then you get a finalist.
Thank you for being here.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
Thomas
we're so proud of
Billy
you.
is the executive chef and owner of Belly of the Beast. Thomas, again, thank you for joining us today on Hello Houston, and congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Be our guest. Be our guest.
I knew you were going to do that.
Coming up.
And that's a wrap for this edition of the Best of Hello Houston. I'm Jim Kovacic, the executive producer of the show. But of course, I got to thank the Hello Houston team. Garrett Bowman, William Metivar, Jen Altide, Todd Holslander, and our hosts, of course, Ernie Manus, Celestia Sherman, and Frank Billingsley. And just a quick reminder, you can listen to our live Hello Houston show weekdays from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. And you can also live stream the show at HoustonPublicMedia.org. If you have any comments about Hello Houston or this Best of program, please text us at 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Hello Houston is a production of Houston Public Media. The opinions expressed by guests of this program are solely their own and do not represent the views of management, staff, or underwriters of Houston Public Media. This is News 88.7.
This is Ira Glass. On This American Life, sometimes we just show up somewhere, turn on our tape recorders, and see what happens.
If you can't get 7 cars in 12 days, you got to look yourself in the mirror and say, holy, what, are you kidding me?
Like at this car dealership, trying to sell its monthly quota of cars, and it is not going well.
I just don't want one balloon to a car. Balloon the whole freaking place so it looks like a circus.
Real life stories every week.
Saturdays at 11 a.m. and Wednesdays at 9 p.m. on News 88.7.
Support comes from Specs, Texas family-owned since 1962, offering cool sips, snacks, and more to help beat the heat for a cooler summer. Details at specsonline.com. The fun starts here.
Good morning. I'm Tom Carter. Looks like a nice day today. Could see some rain later this afternoon. Chance of a thunderstorm after 3. Currently, it is 90. This is your NPR station, KUHF, Houston. News 88.7, a service of the University of Houston.
Welcome to the best of Hello Houston. I'm executive producer Jim Kovacic. I'm also your guide for today's show featuring the best conversations and interviews from our show, Hello Houston. Coming up this hour on the best of Hello Houston, Ernie Manus, Celeste Diaz-Sherman, and Frank Billingsley talk with documentary filmmaker Ken Burns about his latest project, The American Revolution. We then talk to Mythbuster Adam Savage ahead of his Comicpalooza appearance here in Houston. And Texas Monthly barbecue expert Daniel Vaughn will tell us about this year's top 50 list and the Houston restaurants that made the cut. And just a quick reminder, you can listen to our live Hello Houston show weekdays from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. on News 88.7. You can also live stream the show at HoustonPublicMedia.org. If you have any comments about Hello Houston or this best of program, please text us at 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org.
Hello Houston is made possible in part by founding sponsors John Bradshaw and Kathy Sanders, and by gifts from listeners like you.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Witnesses are describing moments of terror and courage during a mass shooting at a Catholic church in Minneapolis this week. NPR's Vanessa Romo spoke with one woman who was there when gunfire blasted through the church's stained glass windows.
Mass had begun, and the worshipers of Annunciation Church had just finished the psalm, "You have searched me and you know me, Lord," when the first shots rang out. Catherine Spandel, an alumni of the small Catholic school, was attending. She says she hid under the pews. Amid the gunfire, she reached for a familiar hand.
As I lay there on the ground, I looked forward, and the young woman, too, rose ahead, who is our pastoral minister for the children. She was facing me, and we reached towards each other, and we prayed the Hail Mary together, and we were both crying.
8-year-old Fletcher Merkel, who was one of 2 students killed in the shooting, sat just 4 pews ahead of Spandel. At least 18 other parishioners, a majority of them children, were injured. Vanessa Romo, NPR News.
The House Oversight Committee has issued a subpoena to the estate of Jeffrey Epstein for more documents and other materials related to the late financier's sex trafficking case. 6 years after Epstein died by suicide in jail, the committee is investigating as a result of bipartisan demands that all Epstein files be released. However, House Speaker Mike Johnson says he does not see a need to pass additional legislation on the matter.
I think what's happened over the last few weeks has probably mooted the necessity of legislation, because right now the administration is in full compliance with congressional subpoenas. They've submitted over 34,000 Epstein documents to Congress just in the last couple of weeks.
Speaker Johnson today on ABC's Good Morning America. A former head of the Federal Emergency Management Agency is accusing the agency of delaying disaster aid. NPR's Rebecca Hersher reports Cameron Hamilton briefly ran FEMA under the current administration.
Cameron Hamilton was fired from FEMA in May after he told Congress he disagreed with the president's goal of eliminating the agency. Now, for the first time since his firing, Hamilton is publicly critiquing the Trump administration's handling of disasters. In a post on the networking site LinkedIn, Hamilton accused the agency of delaying help after disasters. In public comments this week, DHS Secretary Kristi Noem said FEMA is delivering aid more quickly than ever before. Hamilton pushed back on that idea and suggested that some officials may even be, quote, lying. FEMA did not immediately respond to NPR's questions about the accusations. Rebecca Hersher, NPR News.
The White House taking back an additional $4.9 billion in foreign aid using a pocket rescission, meaning that the official request of Congress is made without sufficient time before the end of the fiscal year for lawmakers to act. This is NPR News.
Live from News 88.7 in Houston, I'm Alexandra Hart. Lawmakers are moving forward with a crackdown on out-of-state abortion pill providers. The House voted last night to approve a bill that allows private citizens to sue out-of-state providers who send pills to Texas. The bill's author, Republican Jeff Leach, says the goal is to protect women.
We have story after story after story of women who have been severely impacted medically, emotionally, in every other way by the damage that these pills can and have done to their bodies.
The Senate is expected to give final approval next week. The Houston City Council is considering giving itself more power over changes to infrastructure projects. It could also require the mayoral administration to be more transparent when it wants to make changes to projects. News 88.7's Dominic Anthony Walsh has more.
The proposed updates target projects in the $16.7 billion 5-year capital improvement plan. Before the administration changes or cancels projects in that plan, it would need to inform the city council.
For council to be relevant and exercise its authority, timely information is critical.
Councilmember Julian Ramirez is pushing for the updates. He also wants the city council to have power to reject changes from the administration.
In a strong mayor form of government, it's critical that the power that council has be able to be effective and used to help residents.
Mayor John Whitmire's administration is open to the changes, but has expressed concern about additional administrative burdens involved in regular reports to the city council. I'm Dominic Anthony Walsh, News 88.7.
A flight from Aspen, Colorado, heading to Houston had to be diverted to Austin last night as a result of turbulence. Medical personnel were called to Austin Airport to treat people in need when the plane landed. This was a SkyWest flight operating as a United Express plane, according to KHOU. Officials say 2 people were taken to the hospital, but the injuries are not expected to be life-threatening. I'm Alexandra Hart, News 88.7.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include ARM. On the latest episode of Tech Unheard, ARM CEO and host Renee Haas talks to musician and activist Peter Gabriel about how tech and AI are helping to shape the future in creativity and innovations.
Live from the University of Houston, it's Hello Houston, an open forum on today's biggest stories affecting Houston and beyond. Call now, 713-440-8870, or let us know your thoughts on today's topics by emailing us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now here's your host for Hello Houston, Ernie Manous, Celeste Diaz-Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
Hello, Houston. It is a busy show we have today, so we're going to jump right in. How does that sound?
That sounds great.
Let's do it. He is perhaps the most famous and critically acclaimed documentary filmmaker of all time. Ken Burns has explored numerous subjects, people, and moments in history in his critically acclaimed documentaries: the Civil War, jazz, baseball, the Vietnam War, just to name a few. His newest documentary, The American Revolution, is set to premiere in November. He co-produced it with Sarah Botstein and David Schmidt. To tell us more about the documentary, we welcome Ken and Sarah to the program. Good morning. Welcome.
Good morning. Thank you for having us.
Hello, Houston. Thanks for being here.
Hello, Houston.
You know, I think my first question in all of this, in terms of time, when you're trying to put something together like this, is the Civil War just as far away as the Revolutionary War? Or is there really a difference in that group of years as far as gathering information and the stories?
What a smart question. It's huge difference. I mean, we know the Civil War and we feel it. We feel like we know the people because we have photographs, thousands and thousands of photographs. We don't have newsreels until those veterans start reuniting at 50 and 75 and 100 years. And so that's just stuff you can use in your last episode. The Vietnam, of course, and World War II, subject of another film, are amply covered not only by still photography, but by newsreel. There are no newsreels and there are no photographs for the American Revolution. Right. And what that does, first of all, is it makes us sort of feel detached from the actual events. We see it, we sort of romanticize it. We sort of treat it as an object, a relic in amber. And we don't see it for what it was, as a bloody civil war, as costly as our own Civil War, which was not a civil war as much as a sectional war. This was a civil war, lots of civilian deaths all up and down the 13 former colonies. And so when you have people in paintings, and only a handful, just a tiny percentage of people are painted, then the world gets anonymous. You don't have the portrait that the private had. You do have the portrait of the general, but you don't have the private. So our job, Sarah's and my job, and David Schmidt's, has been over the last nearly 10 years to sort of remove the onus of that, to make this a real and very violent struggle. It does not in any way diminish the great ideas that are a product of this. The most consequential revolution in history, we say. I think one of the most important events in all of world history, certainly the most important event since the birth of Christ. is the invention of the United States, where everyone before was a subject and now people have the opportunity to be citizens and all the tremendous responsibilities. So we've told a story, and we've used reenactment footage, we've used paintings, we've used maps, and we have many people, writers and scholars who comment, but we have hundreds of first-person voices that give dimension and therefore reality to the famous figures like the George Washingtons and the Thomas Jeffersons and the John Adams. But it's also introducing you to a 14-year-old fifer named John Greenwood from Boston who joins the militia, or a 15-year-old from Connecticut who joins the Continental Army, or a 10-year-old gal from Yorktown, Virginia, who's all the way through. Really helps when that 10-year-old gal's remembrances are read by Maya Hawke, or that Tom Hanks is reading some quotes, or Meryl Streep, or Paul Giamatti is reprising his John Adams role, or there's Josh Brolin, or there's Sir Kenneth Branagh. We have French, we have German, we have British, Irish, common soldiers, King George. It is everybody's there, loyalists as well as patriots. And so what happens is, I think the combination of how we've used the reenactments like footage, like newsreel, how we've used the paintings like photographs, how we've treated the landscape. We've always had live cinematography like it's the big star. This is the most beautiful, the prize of North America is what this is all about. And that those voices bring alive the story of the creation of us. And I mean that both as lowercase and uppercase, the U.S., but also us. And the problem is, because it just gets relegated to history or whatever, and it's not boring, it's too boring, and people aren't like, this is one of the best stories. We won't work on a more important film.
Yeah. Sarah, quickly also, it takes, as I understand, 10 years to pull this together, yet it seems so in the moment right now.
Right.
Calculating where we will be by the time a project starts to when it'll finish, how do you guys, you're always right on it.
We love to talk about this because, we start a film in one moment, it comes out in another moment, and the whole way we are making the film, two things are happening. One, we're not listening to anything that's happening around us, and we're hearing the parallels and the ways in which the history is resonating or echoing or talking to the past changes every month, every year that we make the film. And so we often work through 2 or 3 presidential administrations, certainly lots of local elections in our communities. Our lives change and our emotional connections to the story change, as well as the historical relevance or resonances. So, I love that about our work, but really, I say this all the time and we talk about it all the time. We really put our heads down and we try to get the story right and the history right. And then we just let it go out into the world and people will find the echoes and resonances as they change and evolve. And what we want is a film that will stand the test of time and a story that's accurate and dynamic and hopefully not boring.
Yeah, and you can reverse engineer that. What if you didn't do that? What if you're pointing neon signs? Oh, isn't this so much like today? You've just dated your film. You've made it irrelevant, right? So if we are disciplined while we're making it, and we understand, look, there's a failed invasion of Canada in here. There's debates about inoculation. There's an eclipse, There's lots of stuff, hundreds of things that you will go. But if you have a discipline about it, the way, say, an athlete has to be just focused on telling the story and figuring out how to do your job, then you're going to do something, and when it's out, it has that ability to be durable and lasting. And let's remember, today is a school day in most of America, and our films, some of them 35 years old, the Civil War series is 35 years old, are being shown hundreds of times today. Hundreds of times. So a portion of it in classrooms all across the United States. And that's true of Lewis and Clark. It's true of jazz. It's true of the World War II and Vietnam. It's true of country music. It's true of the Roosevelts, the Dust Bowl. They're in rotation, and that is joyous. It wouldn't happen if we're sort of saying, isn't this so like today? Well, we started this and Barack Obama still had 13 months in his presidency, and then we went through the first term of President Trump and the full term of Joe Biden, and now we're into the second term of... It doesn't matter to us. History will always rhyme. It will always resonate because human nature is involved. And the problem, and your interesting and really spot-on first question is about that. We somehow think, because all we see are just the stockings and the breeches and they can't be like us. They are exactly like us. All of the degrees of generosity and greed, of virtue and venality are there among people and sometimes within people. So you can take somebody who's now become so cliched that you can't relate to him or her, and you make them human with flaws, and suddenly they're realer, more dimensional, and you're more curious about them, and you go, they did that? And suddenly the superficiality of the American Revolution, Lexington and Concord, then maybe it's Bunkers Hill, which takes place at Breed Hill, Trenton crosses the Delaware, and then surrender at Yorktown, boomtown, right? And the time between, the surrender at Yorktown happens about 2/3 of the way through our sixth episode of 12 Hours.
And that's what I was going to ask you. So the American Revolution is obviously this 6-part documentary series. And as you're exploring the country's founding struggles and the 8-year War of Independence, how do you decide what needs to go in 6 parts? Right?
So I'll let Sarah answer this too, just to say that you would presume that making a film is a building process.
Right.
It's a subtracting process. We collect 40 to 50 times the amount of material that we'll have for these final 12 hours. More than 500 hours of material, from paintings to maps to interviews with people to some of the reenactments. And then it's figuring out what you can keep. Remember the movie Amadeus? What's too many notes? How can we include a bottom-up as well as a top-down story? How can we give dimension to people who are so familiar that they become unknown to us, like a George Washington, who's without a doubt the most important person in the whole story, though very, very complicated human being. And so it's, and then you meet Betsy Ambler in Yorktown, and you meet John Greenwood, and you meet Joseph Plummore, and you meet loyalists, and we're umpires calling balls and strikes. Wow. But the thing is, it's not a process of adding. It's really a process of subtraction. We collect all this stuff. We work for years gathering the material.
So then how do you know what you cut out at that point?
Well, I was going to answer the question a little differently than Ken, actually, which maybe goes to that. People ask us this question a lot, and I think they're often surprised that our process stays the same regardless of the subject matter. So if you're making a film about jazz music or the Vietnam War, Ernest Hemingway, or Ken worked on a big series on country music, the way we approach the work is always the same. And yes, it's subtractive, but we also are in the business of listening. So we want to add what we're missing, and we work chronologically. Our process is the same. We take our time and we listen very carefully, not only to the scholars and advisors and historians and archivists and visual material, but we're subtracting from everything we collect, which is, a ratio of 10 or 40 to 1. But then we're also adding the things that we're missing because we want to tell the story, I think, of the human experience through a subject. So for me, a war film is more interesting the more political and family dynamics that happen. He loves when the right flank and the left flank and the specifics of a battle. And so I'm going to lean into how Ken sees the importance of a military struggle. And then we're all going to cry when somebody dies, or you learn that, that general's wife is pregnant and her family chose this. It's a great family drama and a great political drama, and it's a war. And so we're adding and subtracting all the time.
Did you find in this something that you were so surprised you just went, oh my gosh?
I don't think there was a day.
A lot.
I mean, that's always the great gift of these projects. I mean, I've been doing this for nearly 50 years. And the great gift is that if, a couple of times, Vietnam, because I grew up in the 60s, and baseball, which I've played and loved since I was a kid. I figured, well, finally I've got something I really know about. I have a general knowledge of American history, and I can, I can hold my own at dinner. But I thought, these two projects, and both of them were daily humiliations for years of what I did not know. And so that's really great. We go into these not sort of trying to assemble these things that we want to tell you to know. The last time I checked, that's homework. We're sharing with you a process of discovery. So it comes in a blizzard of facts, and a blizzard of moments, and a blizzard of individual action. And one of the things that I think draws people to the film is that they're going to be, say, at the biggest battle of the Revolution, the Battle of Long Island, which I don't think you knew. That's one of the things we went, what? And it's a huge tactical mistake that Washington does. The British turn his left flank. He's left it unprotected. Sarah, and now gets it because of the animations and the maps that we used, and so it happens. But we're also interested in introducing you in the middle of that battle to Joseph Plum Martin, this 15-year-old from Connecticut who's joined and he's rowing across the East River, and we've got oars in a boat churning through, and he's headed to this thing, and he is now going, what have I gotten myself into? And so there's a kind of intimacy. You know the calculations and the that George Washington is experiencing, having realized that he for some reason left this Jamaica Pass, undefended. And that the British have gone through it and have come on behind the main force of his army. But you also got an ordinary grunt about to go into what will be the worst fighting of the Revolution to date.
How close did we come to losing?
Oh, I mean, last April 19th, 2 months ago, right, was the 250th anniversary of Lexington. If you were Las Vegas was there, and you were putting odds, 0, right? 0. And then many times throughout this, there's lots of wonderful victories, and you go, okay, well, now we've got it, right? I mean, you want it to, good history, someone told me, is you stay tuned because it might not turn out the way you know it did, right? Mm-hmm. So I mean, I've blown it. I get, spoiler alert, the surrender. But even at the end of the 5th episode, when Charleston falls, you go, I don't know how we're going to do this. You go, well, wait a second. We know it's going to be all right. And then it becomes, well, how do we recover from this extraordinary loss? And that sense that no one then knew that they were George Washington or Thomas Jefferson. No one then understood how it was going to turn out. No, everything was contingency. So we have that total luxury of thinking we know. And I've always said that I really hope that when people were watching, and I heard from thousands of people that this was the case, that when they went to Ford's Theater in our Civil War film, when it got to that scene, that they hoped the gun would jam, or that the door to the box was locked and he couldn't get in. So we know what happened.
Yeah. Do you have to presuppose the audience knows something?
No. We suppose that the audience is ignorant of it, but maybe, and I do not mean this in any insulting way, because an educated 8th grader is a pretty, potent force. Mm-hmm. That you basically can understand the vocabulary of 8th grade, and you've got some knowledge, but we do not presuppose anything. And so part of the excitement for us is how that you can keep those people who are scholars, and we've engaged the services of many, many scholars who themselves had said, I didn't know this person. I didn't know this story. I didn't get that thing, as well as helping us say, you really ought to tell this story. And at the same time, bring along, that kid who just is sitting there looking at, oh my God, it's no longer powdered wig, all of the superficial stuff about George Washington, never tell a lie, all of that stuff. This guy has dimension now. And that's, you'll know who he is, or you'll know how difficult it is to know who he is because of his implacable ways.
As you say that oftentimes, when we think of students, and you said how your films are being watched in school, we think of history and we think government and we think social studies and sitting there and opening this kind of static textbook. Do you find that, Sarah, you mentioned the human connection, connecting that human connection with history. Is that what makes this documentary powerful?
Well, the word history is mostly made up of the word story.
There you go.
Plus hi, which is a good way to begin a story, right? And I think, and I do not want to take away anything from our history teachers. Mm-hmm. We've taken out history. We've taken out civics. That's our fault, not the kids' fault. Mm-hmm. And so it's not that it's boring, is that it's now gotten to be a secondary rather than a central subject. If you don't know where you've been, you can't know where you are, and more importantly, where you're going. Mm-hmm. End of statement. And I think the extent to which teachers employ, and one of the unsung things is that none of this would happen any other place but public media. Like, none of my films over the last 50 years could have been made without public media.
Takes time.
The time that it does to do it, the labor intensity. I could go into any place and get the money I need from somebody else, but they wouldn't give me the time to do it. And so we're able to incubate this. We can able to be sure that this is, the best of us, that these are our director's cuts, and they haven't got a suit coming in making longer, shorter, sexier, less sexy, more violent, less violent, whatever the thing of the moment is. And so I think with regard to teachers, they're so happy to have, particularly now as we've moved into a visual media where kids have a visual literacy, to be able to say, let me draw you into the Civil War by showing you the opening of this series. And it's about Wilmer McLean, who starts off with the first battle, and a Union shell goes down his kitchen, so he says, I got to move out of here. He moves far south and west of Richmond, out of harm's way, to a dusty crossroads called Appomattox Courthouse. And 3.5 years later, in his living room, Lee surrenders to Grant, and Wilmer McLean can rightfully say the war began in my front yard and ended in my front parlor. Wow. That's a wow, right?
Yeah.
And there's not an 8th grader or any of us who wouldn't go, wow. And that's where the story comes in. And sometimes we're trying to hit marks about curriculums, and then the dates become not important signposts or anchors, tent flaps to things. You don't know who's in the tent. We want to tell you who's in the tent. But
Are you happy with the finished product?
we're always fussing. We still have one. We're going back, and we have one episode to mix and online. And Sarah and I, we locked this series back in January, and we have unlocked and changed little tiny things here, and nothing you'd notice. We're very happy with it. We're so excited to share it with you. We can't wait. And what's really clear is that there's a kind of bubbling up of enthusiasm that I haven't felt since our Civil War series. This is the time to know about it, to be reinforced with these ideas. You know, before people were subjects, now they're citizens. We figured out a way that everybody heretofore had been under an authoritarian rule, and that we invented, you know, all of these checks and balances, all these things that permitted us to live in a democratic society. It's really exhilarating, and it's more exhilarating because you know the phenomenal cost in blood and treasure and sacrifice that made it happen.
We don't like kings.
We don't like kings. Don't want kings. Yep. We figured that out early on. So.
The American Revolution is a new documentary co-produced by Ken Burns and Sarah Botstein. It is set to premiere on November 16th. Ken and Sarah, thank you both so much for joining us on Hello Houston.
So happy to be here. Thank you.
This is the best of Hello Houston on News 88.7. I'm Jim Kovacic, the executive producer of the show. And just a quick reminder, you can listen to our live Hello Houston show weekdays from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. on News 88.7. If you have any comments about Hello Houston or this best of program, please text us at 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Coming up on the best of Hello Houston, we talked to Mythbuster Adam Savage ahead of his Comic Palooza appearance here in Houston. This is News 88.7.
Support comes from Laporte CPAs and Business Advisors, an independent accounting and business advisory firm serving clients for more than 75 years, with 190 employees across offices in Houston, New Orleans, and other locations. More information at laporte.com.
Support comes from Mother Jones, presenting The Lingering Storm, Climate Change, Displacement, and Action, exploring the impact of Hurricane Katrina on climate, community, and resilience. September 10th. More at motherjones.com/lingering storm.
And now back to Hello Houston. To comment on any of today's topics, call 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Now back to Ernie Manous, Celeste Diaz-Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
Oh, he's there.
Welcome back to Hello Houston.
Yes, welcome back. Adam Savage is an editor-in-chief at Tested.com, a YouTube channel that explores the intersection of science, popular culture, and emerging technology. He's also the author of Every Tool is a Hammer. I love that title. But most of you likely know him best As the former co-host of Mythbusters, he joins us right now. Welcome, Adam.
Hi, Adam.
Good morning. How are you guys? We are doing great. I love the name of your book. That just makes me smile when I see it because, that's how I use most tools.
Yes, we can always find
an old colleague of mine, Mark Buck. And at one point I was using a totally wrong thing to hammer something. And Mark came over and he put his hand on my shoulder and he said, remember, every tool is a hammer. And I pitched that so hard to the publisher when I wrote the book, and they rejected it like 3 times and eventually came around. They were like, that's way too many words for a title.
Oh, it's brilliant. Anyway, what's in the book? If you get past the title, what are you going to find?
Every Tool is a Hammer is both a practical guide to some of the organizational strategies that I use as a maker and that I've used as a maker and a producer of content and all sorts of other stuff. It's also deeply philosophical about how I've approached my career, my life, my creative output. And it's a bit of a personal history, a bit of an autobiographical dive through how I got to where I am.
Yeah. Well, you got there with Mythbusters for sure. I love Mythbusters. And you guys made it seem so easy. But the way you were kind of going at it, it almost seemed like you weren't the scientists and engineers that you are. I don't think a lot of people know that you guys really know what you're talking about when it comes to science and engineering.
That you're not just an influencer.
Yeah. You weren't just trying to jump on an elevator 6 inches before it hit the ground to see if you would survive. I mean, you really knew what you were doing. What were the biggest challenges with Mythbusters?
It's so funny that you say it like that because, first of all, it was at least we sent in a demo reel to the Discovery Channel in the spring of 2002, and they showed up 3 weeks later to shoot the pilots, and we didn't stop filming for 14 years. Wow. Great. There was no off season. We shot 42 weeks a year, and it was at least 2 years before we realized we were making a science show.
Wow.
Oh.
It was such a full-on freight train. And then once we got that, there was this moment where Jamie and I had driven down to some technical company, Zircon, the people that make stud finders to find the studs in the walls. And we ended up chatting with the engineers from Zircon for an extra 2 hours. And we're driving home from the location, and Jamie's like, that was really weird. And I'm like, well, what was weird? And he's like, well, they were talking to us as if we knew what they were talking about.
Well, Johnny Knoxville and his crew set up that let's go crazy and do things that are challenging. And you guys kind of fell into that genre, I think. And a lot of people went, well, these are just some crazy guys trying to prove if something works or not. They didn't realize you really did know what you were talking about. And still do.
Well, and that was the most fun part of it, was that the show was really driven by all 5 of us hosts and the things we were curious about. The show ended up being this amazing engine machine for answering questions, and all of us were addicted to that process.
Okay, this is a dumb question, but I have to ask it. Over the course of your career, the thing that surprised you the most that you believed would prove true and didn't?
Yes. There's a fishing myth that if a braided steel cable on a boat gets stretched to its breaking point, when it breaks, it will whip like a sword and slice right through you. You can see this in movies, like horror movies do this all the time. And there's not a fisherman in the world that doesn't know this is true. And we set up to do it. We built a beautiful experimental methodology where we figured out how to break a steel cable at 90% of its breaking strength so that we could do it reliably and safely. We figured out how to stretch it around an earthwork so that as it broke, it would have the maximal amount of force. And then we figured out where that force was the highest, and we put a pig carcass right there. And I set up these high-speed cameras because I really wanted this picture of the cable cruising through the flesh of the pig, right? It's like amazing high-speed, disgusting shot. It was like, this is what I wanted as a producer. And we spent all morning denting pigs, but we didn't break any skin. And we tried 4 different widths of cable, and we got the same result every time. And I remember calling up my producer of that sequence, Linda, at lunchtime, and I was like, hey, do we have any firsthand accounts of someone being sliced by a cable? And she's like, I'm sure we do. Let me double check. She called me back half an hour later and said, not a single one.
Nope.
There are plenty of ways that cables and ropes on a boat can take your limbs with them. but slicing them like a sword is not one of them. And so we started that day with me thinking I would get these great sliced ham high-speed shots, and we finished the day busting it. I was very surprised.
So then just to follow on the end of that, so then when we saw those experiments, what we were seeing on the show were the actual experiment. It wasn't you had done it 40 times in a lab beforehand and then set it up to shoot.
I want to tell you a story. When Discovery at one point was thinking about taking the whole show 3D, they called up Jim Cameron because he had all the best 3D guys, and he sent one of his producers to spend a couple of days with us. And this 3D producer spent a couple of days watching us film, and he turned to my producer and I, and he said, let me get this straight. The experiment takes precedence over the filming? We said, yes, it does. And he said, I would have never imagined such a model was feasible.
Yeah.
You're listening to Hello Houston. We're speaking with Adam Savage, who's the editor-in-chief of Tested.com and a former co-host of Mythbusters. You can join the conversation at 713-440-8870. Now, I have a question, but we did get a question in from our YouTube comments. My British computer guy says, Adam, as a fellow maker and tinkerer, is there one standout project that you were part of that made you giddy and excitement to work on, or one that challenged your beliefs in science?
That's a wonderful question. I will say, I've been really lucky in my career. I started work in commercial special effects in the early 90s, cut my teeth on a couple of hundred commercials. Then I moved into George Lucas's effects company, Lucasfilm, in the late 90s and spent five and a half years there. And one of the things my friends have always pointed out to me is I would often talk about what I was going to do the next day by saying, tomorrow I get to, instead of tomorrow I have to. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I feel like I've been incredibly lucky in the get to department. As far as ideas that challenge my ideas of science, I mean, the fundamental central idea of mine about science that got challenged and upended by Mythbusters was that when I started making the show, and this is no joke, I thought of science as something that smart people did. And by defining it that way, I placed myself outside that category. And it was only after a couple of years of those conversations where Jamie and I were like, wow, they talk to us like we know what they're talking about, that we realized, oh, what they see in us is a simpatico mindset and philosophy and morality about science and engineering. And so I have come to understand through the course of doing Mythbusters that I am a scientist and an engineer, and embracing that is a fundamental shift in my consciousness about science.
Real quick, the word science comes from the Greek scientia, which means to know. And science, you just want to know. Mm-hmm. And that's what Mythbusters was all about. We just want to know, is this real or not?
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Celeste.
Well, I was just saying, and to that effect, you just mentioned how all the different titles and the different hats that you have worn. I mean, you talked about special effects designer, fabricator, actor, educator, television personality, and producer. Adam, which would you say you felt most yourself? Which was your favorite hat and role that you have done over your career?
Oh, wow. It's all over the place. I'm all over the place.
Same, Adam, same.
My first answer, I mean, the thing is that, look, you guys are also in the storytelling business, right? And you tell stories in different modalities. Sometimes you write them, sometimes you speak them, sometimes you talk them on a stage. Each of these are different modalities for communication, and I'm kind of addicted to all of them.
Yeah.
I really, because a part of me wants to say that the place I feel the most centered and myself is alone at my workbench on any given day. Mm-hmm. But that's not exactly true, because there are moments when I've stood on a stage and communicated to an audience and heard 2,000 people gasp when they all understood what I was hoping to drop into their brain pans. And, David Mamet has this great quote. He says, you can blackmail an audience into a standing ovation, but you can't blackmail them into a gasp. That is
that's a great quote. As we notice in today's day and age, the phrase of truth in advertising pretty much seems to have gone away. Is it the lack of that makes the work you do so much more important?
Well, I mean, I think that, look, people gravitate. I think one of the most gratifying things about concentrating on this YouTube channel in the past 10 years has been how much what an amazing landscape and What an amazing landscape that YouTube currently is for science and engineering understanding and communication. And I think that people will gravitate. They're not going to take the thing that is spoon-fed them. They're going to go find the content they want. And I love YouTube for being that. Last year, 53+% of American television hours were spent watching YouTube. It is our de facto television now.
Yeah. Do you realize the trust people put in you, and how do you manifest that in the work you do?
I do realize the trust they put in me, and I try and be very boundaried about what I say. It's like when you work in LA, you learn very quickly that what you think of a movie, no one wants to hear it, right? Everyone's making movies in LA. They don't want to hear your honest opinion. That's just not how that works. I'm so sorry. Tell me the question again.
Just wondering about the significance of realizing how much people value your opinion and your thought, the trust they put in you.
I really try and hold that very tight and make it very clear what the limits of my knowledge are at any given moment that I am talking about something. I also want to be awake and aware that anybody else's experience might be different than mine, and to try and accommodate that. I do a live stream every couple of weeks where I take questions from fans on the channel, and it's been a wonderful several years of doing this, and each time I'm really trying to make it clear, like, I'm not a god of academia here. I'm just expressing my ideas and what has worked for me. And frequently in the comments are all sorts of wonderful elaborations on stuff I'm talking about from people whose life experience is vastly different than mine. I'm really grateful for that.
Do you think if Mythbusters was brought back today, right now, would it look the same? Would it be a different landscape trying to start something like that, given TikTok, given how any student and kid out there can kind of, or engineer at a university can essentially do that today?
I think the biggest difference is, I think you're right that there's a lot of that content happening on TikTok and YouTube and other platforms. But the biggest difference, Mythbusters, when they showed up to shoot the pilots, they showed up with 5 people. Nobody makes television like that anymore.
Right. Yeah.
Right? It's going to be a video village on day one, and it's pointless. And by the time we were done making Mythbusters, our budget was massive. It had been Discovery's biggest hit for like 12 of its 14 years. And we had so much wonderful resources to play with. 2 years later, when I made Savage Builds, they gave me less than 1/10 of that budget. They expected to be the same show. And that's where television's been going. I will tell you that in television right now, if you have a hit show, that network will insist that your second season have a lower budget.
Wow.
Because you already know how to make it, so please just give us some of that money that you were taking before.
We had a wonderful text here. The first Mythbusters episode I remember seeing was the Jaws special, and I remember being shocked when they found out that the shark wouldn't have blown up from shooting the scuba tank in its mouth. Probably the first time I realized that not everything that happens in movies is always realistic.
I will tell you that, God, this is somewhere around 2009. We filmed Jaws in about, I think, 2006, 2007. 2009, David Zaslav, the head of Discovery, called me on the phone personally. And he was like, Adam, I just had this 2-hour meeting with Steven Spielberg. And then he spent about 30 minutes telling me how much Spielberg loved our Jaws episode, even though we trashed his physics up and down throughout the whole movie.
That's funny. And you can't ride a bicycle in the air either.
Exactly. And you can't walk under the water holding a boat full of air above you like Pirates of the Caribbean.
So, Adam, tell me this before we let you go. What is it you don't know today, and what is it you want to learn?
Oh, I mean, I don't know. This is a
climate change, existence of God. Go for it, Adam.
Yeah, look, the world is in a rough spot. My brain goes all over the place.
Frank is leading the witness here, Your Honor.
I have twin adult sons, and there's a part of me that knows that I'll be gone before they're all the way done, and I want to know how they turn out. I want to know how that happens, how that plays out. The only reason I want to live for an extremely long time is to be able to spend more time with them.
That's sweet.
Adam Savage is the editor-in-chief of Tested.com and a former co-host of Mythbusters. Adam, thanks for joining us today on Hello Houston.
Thank you so much.
I'm Celestia Sherman, and thanks for listening to the best of Hello Houston.
And I'm Frank Billingsley. If you want to see some of the best things that we've done, check out the Houston Public Media YouTube channel. We have full shows and isolated interviews, too.
And I'm Ernie Manous. Sure, we talk about topics on Hello Houston, but we also have the returns of some of our favorite segments, like Interviews with Ernie Manous, where I get a chance to sit down with newsmakers and names you know to have long-form conversations about what they're doing and the impact it's having on today's society. Everyone from opera star Ana Maria Martinez to playwright Alfred Urey has taken a chance to sit down with us. You never know who's going to come next.
You can also check out My Cold Coffee podcast. It's offering a moment for you to hear a real conversation on how to navigate life, whether that's finances, parenting, or just maybe taking that next big step.
And I don't know how I can compete with that, but I have plenty of friends, so I have my Friends of Frank feature.
Like Frank said at the beginning of this, you have to remember that on the show itself, you get just a taste of what these conversations are like. But when you go to our YouTube channel, you can find the full interviews there. So you can either take it in the small doses we give you on Hello Houston or indulge yourself with the full conversations. Once again, thanks for checking out the best of Hello Houston. And don't forget our live show, weekdays from 11 to 1 right here on News 88.7.
When the news is overwhelming and facts feel harder to find, public media is your steady, reliable voice.
But with federal funding cut, public media stations like ours needs your support more than ever.
That's why we've launched the Houston Public Media Resiliency Fund. It's our plan to help bridge the gap in funding and protect public media in Houston, no matter what comes next.
Stand with us. Give to the Resiliency Fund now at houstonpublicmedia.org/donate.
Support for Houston Public Media comes from the Elizabeth D. Rockwell Center on Ethics and Leadership, presenting How to Break Up with Your Phone, a lecture with author Catherine Price on September 18th at the University of Houston. More at uh.edu/hobby. Support for Houston Public Media comes from the Holdsworth Center, a nonprofit committed to helping Texas public schools grow strong leaders, accepting nominations for teachers in the Houston area to attend a Texas Hill Country Wellness Retreat at teacherretreat.org.
The best of Hello Houston on News 88.7 with Ernie Manous, Celestia Sherman, and Frank Billingsley.
Texas Monthly released their list of the 50 best barbecue joints in Texas. The magazine's barbecue team traveled thousands of miles, visited hundreds of barbecue joints across the state to determine the best candidates for the list. So joining us now to tell us more is Daniel Vaughn, who is the quote-unquote barbecue editor at Texas Monthly. I guess maybe he majored in barbecue.
I don't
want that job.
I don't know where
Daniel,
you get that.
how do you get that job? Asking for a friend on record.
Daniel, welcome to Hello Houston.
I majored in architecture. I guess that's the. I was an architect for 12 years before doing a food blog all about barbecue. And after eating about 500 different barbecue joints, Texas Monthly decided to bring me on, and I changed careers completely.
So, what's your golden list? What makes a great barbecue sandwich?
A great barbecue sandwich. Wow. Well, so much of what we're looking for on this list is what's on the barbecue tray, without any help from the pickles, the onions, the sauce, and the bun. My favorite barbecue sandwich is really a chopped brisket sandwich. I mean,
can't go wrong.
To me, that is, I think, the number one order in barbecue across Texas. Chopped brisket on a nice buttered griddled bun, if you can. Some pickles, onions, dill pickles, please. No sweet pickles.
Before you get deeper
sauce.
into all of this, we've talked about this on the show. I judge at the barbecue cook-off here every year, and we get maybe 20 samples. And by the time we've worked through those 20, it all kind of blurs together, so much of it. You're doing hundreds of barbecues. what separates the best from the second best or the third best? Because it seems like there'd be just a huge grouping at the top and a huge grouping at the bottom. And that pretty much any then could change position depending on your taste and mood that day.
Really, it's more about like a lot of places are in the middle, and few places are, on that bad list, and very few places are on that really great list. And so, I mean, it's all about consistency, right? I mean, we're looking at the barbecue for sure. Like that is the primary thing we're looking at. How is your sliced brisket, the pork ribs, the sausage? Those things are served at every barbecue joint in Texas, along with whatever poultry item, whether it's chicken or turkey, the sides, the desserts. We're looking at all those things, but it really comes down to the barbecue itself, to those smoked meats. And then, those, is it well seasoned? Is it juicy? Is it tender? For all those items. And then, when it comes to like the best of the best, it's about consistency over several visits, right? So is it that impressive the first time, the second time, and the third time?
What about the sauce? What about the sauce?
What about the sauce?
There's so many different kinds. No,
What about the sauce?
There's so many different kinds. I mean, that can really screw up a good barbecue sandwich,
Well, if it's good barbecue, it doesn't have sauce.
Well, I don't know about that. I'm a Southern boy. I've got to have sauce.
Same. I like sauce.
Yeah, I mean, yes. As our governor once said, it's not great barbecue without the sauce, and then was supremely roasted right after that, because Texas barbecue doesn't need sauce when it's great. I mean, we do have a whole segment in there about fun, inventive barbecue sauces that we encountered over our big search. But I want my barbecue sauce on the side. I want to be able to dunk it if I feel like it, or leave it alone if it doesn't need it.
Okay, enough process.
So, I want that choice.
Enough process. What made the list in our area?
Houston barbecue joints? Yeah. Talk to us about Houston.
Oh, y'all not have a subscription, man.
And we also don't have any barbecue in front of us, which would have been a
that is a tragedy. Well, and unfortunately, Monday is such a tough day to find barbecue as well. So many places are closed, but Truth Barbecue is highest on the list there, number 9, in Houston and another location in Brenham, and that's been our favorite in Houston for the last list as well. So
why?
Truth Barbecue is spectacular. Their brisket it's just flawless. The fatty side and the lean side both super juicy, great smoke flavor, great seasoning level. I mean, for me, I want my brisket and really all the barbecue to have that balance of I want to taste the smoke, the seasoning, and the meat itself. If any one of those things overpowers, then then the next place down the list is going to win.
Okay, you said Truth. You said Truth was number 9. What would it possibly take for them to move up to number 1?
Well, a lot of it, when it comes down to the final weeks of tasting is me going to each of these places, and what ends up sticking out more than the great bites are the small mistakes. And so really it's just about small mistakes making the difference, really. The difference between number 1 and number 10 is minute. We have a blessing in Texas of really incredible barbecue all over the state. And so, it is tough to judge one to the next. And so, like I said, it often comes down to little mistakes.
Well, fortunately, Damaris is open on Monday, barbecue. And have you ever gone to Coop's in Galveston? It's a mom and pop barbecue.
Yeah.
It's terrific.
Yes. They got the billboard on the way down from Houston. So you can't miss it. I did enjoy Coop's. I wrote about Coop's, I think last month. Yeah. And I enjoy the array of barbecue they have and the sides.
Okay, Truth is number 9. Highest we have in Houston. What's next for Houston?
So then Brisket and Rice and Pinkertons are both in our top 50. So Pinkertons has, of course, been around for a while. They also have a San Antonio location. And, we love their variety.
My co-hosts are writing down as you're saying these.
And if you love sauce, then you got to go get those ribs and get the candy paint on them. That is their super sweet sauce that they literally paint on with a paintbrush onto your ribs.
Is Rudy's on your list?
You really haven't read this list in like the last 20 years. Rudy's doesn't have a chance. It's chain barbecue.
It's getting rough in here.
It's getting hot.
The cream corn is pretty good. I'll say that.
we come together as a team in late August, to really send out the marching orders of which region each of these tasters is going to have. And in doing so, I put together a PowerPoint presentation showing everyone what they should be looking for. But we also have barbecue in front of us. And we ordered in Franklin Barbecue and Rudy's Barbecue. So you could see really two ends of the barbecue spectrum when tasting. So we could talk about different qualities of the barbecue. Of course,
you've listed 3 for Houston. I believe there's 6 altogether on your list from our area, correct?
Yeah, so also in Bel Air, so it might be kind of hard to find in the list because we do alphabetize it by city, and Blood Bros Barbecue is technically in Bel Air rather than Houston. So fear not, they're in our honorable mentions list. Feege's Barbecue in Houston as well, Regal's and Gatlin's.
That's by me.
What about the pit room? Pit room there?
The pit room is not on our list this time around. But if you go further out in the Houston area, we really love Corkscrew Barbecue out in Spring. And then there's a newcomer of Rosemeyer Barbecue. It's a food truck in Spring that, it's sitting there next to a gas station. They really do incredible barbecue and different homemade ice cream every week.
Any new surprising trend you saw in the barbecue world that actually worked, that you thought they're onto something?
Well, a big trend that we've seen really since the best new barbecue joint list that we put out 2 years ago is really this fusion of a lot of different ethnic cuisines with barbecue. And, brisket and rice is one of those where they have their Vietnamese roots, and they have rice is such a big component of what they're doing. They have a brisket fried rice is one of their big popular dishes, and then sliced brisket served over top of white rice being another one. Poor man's macaroni, which is like this sort of blue-collar Vietnamese dish of spaghetti and tomato paste. I'm sorry, macaroni and tomato paste and bacon is one of their side dishes, so making it really unique. As well as those candied pickled jalapenos they serve.
It's interesting that you mentioned that fusion. Levant Barbecue just opened off Westheimer near us, and it's halal, and it was absolutely delicious. And what I liked is, like you said, they had the regular, at this specific barbecue joint, they had regular macaroni, but then they had their own like cucumber salads and all the different fusions. We did have a question. The Dark One asks, how about Sugarland? What is great near Sugarland?
Well, I would say the closest barbecue there would be Harlem Road Barbecue in Richmond. And so that is also in our honorable mentions list. And Chef Ara Malekian out there does a great job with beef ribs, the brisket, the pork ribs, and his desserts. He's got this chocolate bread pudding, which is just fantastic.
My last question for you is, what are you having for lunch today?
Probably some seafood.
I was going to say a green juice. How about a green juice?
A nice salad.
Maybe a green juice and a salad.
That's right. Daniel Vaughn is the barbecue editor at Texas Monthly. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us today on Hello Houston.
Thank you.
That wraps up this edition of the Best of Hello Houston. I'm Jim Kovacic, the executive producer of the show. And of course, I got to thank the Hello Houston team. Garrett Bowman, William Mentivar, Jen Altide, Todd Holslander, and our hosts Ernie Manus, Celeste Diaz-Sherman, and Frank Billingsley. And just a quick reminder, you can listen to our live Hello Houston show weekdays from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. You can also live stream the show at HoustonPublicMedia.org. If you have any comments about Hello Houston or this Best of program, please text us at 713-440-8870 or email us at talk@hellohouston.org. Hello Houston is a production of Houston Public Media. The opinions expressed by the guests of this program are solely their own and do not represent the views of management, staff, or underwriters of Houston Public Media. This is News 88.7.
This is Jennifer Hickson of The Moth. Moth shows feature eyewitness accounts of the most important or hilarious or moving stories in a person's life. We don't allow any sort of script on stage, so the stories have the excitement of a sporting event, but the intimacy of a tete-a-tete. The Moth is simple and satisfying, like a home-cooked meal for the ears. That's the Moth Radio Hour from the Public Radio Exchange, prx.org.
The Moth Radio Hour, Saturdays at noon on News 88.7.
Support comes from Moody Center for the Arts, opening their fall 2025 exhibition, Biomorph, on September 5th from 6 to 8 p.m. 7 international artists explore the intersection of biology, society, and technology. Details at moody.rice.edu.
We have a chance for showers, maybe a thunderstorm after 3 o'clock today, the high getting up to 94. And right now it's 91. This is your NPR station, KUHF, Houston News 88.7, a service of the University of Houston. It's 1 o'clock.
Archaeologists are now taking a fresh look at ancient tattoos with the help of tattoo artists. I'm Flora Lichtman, and this is Science Friday. To understand ancient tattoos from thousands of years ago, sometimes you gotta tattoo yourself.
We can compare to preserved skin in the archaeological record and see how those ancient tattoos were made.
Plus, every astronaut talks about the magnificence of space.
When you actually get in that rocket and you leave the launch pad, it's the most amazing thing.
But if you haven't been to space yourself, can you really understand it? The author of a space novel talks with an astronaut about experiencing and imagining life in orbit. That's after this.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. The White House plans to unilaterally pull back nearly $5 billion in foreign aid programs Congress had already approved. It's using what's known as a pocket rescission. The White House is acting late in the fiscal year, leaving Congress little time to respond before foreign aid funding expires. The fiscal year ends September 30th. Israel's military says it has recovered the remains of 2 more hostages, one of whom has been positively identified during a covert operation in Gaza. 48 Israeli hostages captured by Hamas remain in Gaza. 20 of them are believed to still be alive. NPR's Jackie Northam reports from Tel Aviv.
Israel's military says the recovered body has been identified as Ilan Weiss, who was killed when Hamas militants attacked Israel October 7, 2023. He was 56 years old. His body was taken into Gaza. His remains were discovered during a recent military operation. The remains of another Israeli hostage were also discovered. Its identity has not yet been made public. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is under increasing public pressure to strike a ceasefire deal with Hamas to get the rest of the hostages home. Even so, Israel's military is pushing ahead with a major offensive in Gaza. Jackie Northam, NPR News, Tel Aviv.
Former Vice President Kamala Harris will no longer have Secret Service protection because it was revoked by President Trump this week. Here's NPR's Deepa Shivaram.
It's typical that former vice presidents only have Secret Service protection for 6 months after they leave office. But in Harris's case, she received an extension of her detail. Now, President Trump is revoking that extension, so Harris will lose her detail that was extended past July of this year. This comes as Harris is about to embark on a nationwide tour to promote her new book, 107 Days, a recounting of her historically short run for president last year. Harris currently lives in Los Angeles, where she has been since she left Washington in January. Deepa Shivaram, NPR News.
Students were running a little late for their first Mass of the school year at the Annunciation Catholic Church in Minneapolis Wednesday. Catherine Spandel tells NPR people were filing into the church minutes after the service's scheduled start of 8:15 a.m. Worshippers finished the psalm, "You have searched me and you know me, Lord," when shots rang out. At the end of it, 2 children, an 8 and a 10-year-old, were dead. 15 minors and 3 adults in their 80s were injured. NPR's Jason DeRose has more on the investigation into the shooter.
Police say the shooter had no criminal history and no other incidents that would have put them in law enforcement's radar. And they say there's no evidence that the shooter was radicalized, but did have a fascination with mass violence.
That's NPR's Jason DeRose reporting the shooter was found dead later of a self-inflicted gunshot wound. At last check on Wall Street, the Dow Jones Industrial Average was down 156 points. You're listening to NPR News.
Live from the Texas newsroom, I'm Alexandra Hart. Governor Greg Abbott has signed the law creating new congressional maps in Texas.
Texas is now more red in the United States Congress.
The new maps give Republicans an advantage of 5 seats currently held by Democrats in next year's midterms. Abbott says the maps more accurately reflect the voting patterns in Texas. The congressional redistricting set off an intense fight that saw state Democrats leaving the state on a 2-week quorum break to halt the legislation. Texas lawmakers are moving forward with a crackdown on out-of-state abortion pill providers. The House voted last night to approve a bill that allows private citizens to sue out-of-state providers who send pills to Texas. The bill's author, Republican Jeff Leach, says the goal is to protect women.
We have story after story after story of women who have been severely impacted medically, emotionally, in every other way by the damage that these pills can and have done to their bodies.
The Senate is expected to give final approval next week. If you're traveling this Labor Day weekend, then you should have plenty of company. This is one of the peak travel times of the year. AAA's Daniel Armbruster says the good news is travel prices are down across the board.
Gas prices are cheaper, hotels are cheaper, and car rentals are cheaper this Labor Day weekend compared to last year. So that could have a few folks looking at those last-minute deals to take off on a trip that might otherwise not have.
Texas highways are expected to be especially congested later this afternoon, as well as Sunday and Monday evenings as people return home. I'm Alexandra Hart from the Texas Newsroom.
Support for these Texas headlines comes from Texas Mutual Insurance Company, a workers' compensation provider committed to helping Texas communities and emphasizing safety. More at texasmutual.com/TexansGetIt.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Fisher Investments. As a fiduciary, Fisher Investments is obligated to act in their client's best interest. Learn more at FisherInvestments.com. Investing in securities involves the risk of loss. This is NPR.
For more local news happening in the Houston area, go to our website, HoustonPublicMedia.org. This is News 88.7.
This is Science Friday. I'm Flora Lichtman. Later in the hour, what scientists are learning from studying ancient tattoos and the inner lives of astronauts. But first, this Friday marks the 20th anniversary of the landfall of Hurricane Katrina, a devastating storm that hit the Gulf Coast of the U.S. in 2005, causing profound damage in New Orleans. Here to reflect on that anniversary and round up other science news from the week is Maggie Kurth, science writer and editor. Maggie, welcome back to Science Friday.
Hi, thanks for having me.
20 years on, what have we learned from Katrina? Has anything changed?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. It's been, like you say, 20 years since Katrina pushed storm surge through our New Orleans levee system. It flooded 80% of the city. It killed more than 700 people in just New Orleans alone. And that event has really shaped the way Americans think about climate disasters and how they happen. You know, you're talking about rising risk, inadequate defenses, and then those social consequences of how police, media, and neighboring communities ended up vilifying survivors. And then the government and nonprofits failed those same people when they tried to rebuild their lives. There's been change, but it's not all been good.
What about sea level rise? What have we learned about that?
Well, there's a couple of sobering studies out this month that suggest that climate risk and infrastructure failure parts of this equation are still a problem for New Orleans. So first off, researchers at Tulane compared 30 years of satellite data to climate models, and they found that sea rise projections that were made originally back in the mid-1990s have turned out to be remarkably accurate. In 1996, the IPCC models were projecting about 8 centimeters of sea level rise over the next 30 years. Satellites were directly measuring the height of the ocean in that same time period and found a 9-centimeter rise.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a really big deal for climate science because those early models were pretty crude compared to what we have today. And there was just a lot less known in particular about how important ice melt in Antarctica and Greenland would turn out to be. So today, these satellites show that sea level rise is accelerating, and the models find a low confidence possibility that catastrophic ice sheet collapse could really inundate low-lying cities.
What about the levees? I mean, their failure was such a huge part of the Katrina disaster. Are walls and levees a sustainable strategy?
Unfortunately, it's looking like they aren't. That's this other story that has the more immediate risk for New Orleans. The Times-Picayune recently had a story reporting that the city's $15 billion hurricane walls are actually sinking faster than the sea level is rising.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, in some parts of town, they're sinking at a rate of 28 millimeters a year, which doesn't sound like much, but you combine that with stronger hurricanes, higher sea levels, and it could really mean the difference between a bad storm and a deadly disaster.
In other climate news, there's a story out this week about heat waves and their health effects.
Yeah, so there's a large long-term study out of Taiwan that found that heat waves can age your body as much as smoking and drinking can. And this study is focusing on the ways that heat stresses your body and causes changes to your organs that are similar to what happens as you age. So it's the kind of thing that can make you more susceptible to dementia, heart disease, cancer, diabetes, things like that. This study followed more than 24,000 people between 2008 and 2022. And during that time, the researchers took samples and they ran tests on these participants, measuring things like inflammation, liver and kidney function, and blood pressure. There were about 30 heat waves that happened in Taiwan in those years, but people had different levels of exposure depending on factors like whether they lived in rural areas or worked outside. And the more heat wave exposure, the more the participants' medical results showed signs of aging.
How much faster were they aging in relation to their exposure to heat?
Not a huge increase. You know, we're talking about less than a quarter of a year added to your biological clock for every 1.3 degrees Celsius extra that you're exposed to. But again, this is a rate of aging that's on par with things like regular smoking or drinking that we already take seriously as threats.
It's been a chaotic week in DC health circles. Several leading scientists have been forced out or resigning at the CDC. And at the same time, at the FDA, there's new guidance on COVID vaccines. What all is going on?
Yeah, so Robert Kennedy Jr. has announced new guidelines limiting who's approved for COVID-19 vaccines. You know, previously we're going on kind of the emergency situation approval from when the pandemic was at its height, and he basically canceled that. So it's going to be harder to get vaccinated if you're under 65 and healthy.
In what way?
Well, for example, people who want a COVID vaccine this year are going to have to consult with their doctor first, most likely, instead of going directly to a pharmacy like you've been able to do in the past. And it's not clear what impact the decision by the FDA will have on things like whether your insurance covers your vaccine. And access could really end up depending a lot on the particulars of your doctor and what they choose to stock and what they choose to prescribe.
Will you need a prescription to get the vaccine?
Basically, what's going on is that it's becoming off-label use for anybody under 65 and healthy. And off-label use is legal, but it kind of ends up making things more complicated. So doctors are allowed to keep saying people can get a vaccine, prescribing a vaccine to everyone, but some might not want to because there's liabilities around off-label use. And because the guidelines are getting issued later than they normally do in the year, it's not clear whether insurance is going to cover it yet.
So does that mean that if you have a condition that puts you at higher risk, you can get a vaccine just as easily as you could before if you were under 65?
It sounds like that is the case, yes. But what counts as high risk seems to be a little bit complicated. The FDA had a limited number of things that they were sort of listing as increased risk. But the CDC is supposed to have its own list that's not out yet. And that kind of adds to some of the confusion and chaos that's happening. And at the same time, you're seeing things like, you know, different health agencies are signaling different policy. Medical societies like the American Academy of Pediatrics are issuing their own guidelines that are different from the FDA. And there's a research group at the University of Minnesota who put out its own evidence report for fall vaccines that is also different from the FDA. So there's just a lot of confusion about who is going to get listened to when it comes down to what doctors and pharmacies and insurance can and will do.
Yeah, it is so confusing for Americans to have to sort through all
It's
of these different
incredibly
recommendations.
confusing.
Yeah. Okay, let's move back in time. Other health news. There's a story about ancient mucus.
Yeah, so this is kind of interesting. There's a study tracking the origins of a variant of MUC19, which is a gene that controls type, thickness, and location of mucus production. Now,
This is a good Halloween costume.
I know, right?
You know?
It's my muke thinking costume. So this variant today is really common among people living in the Andes Mountains in South America. And it turns out, though, that this gene variant got to humans through interbreeding that happened between Denisovans, Neanderthals, and us. The assumption is that it would have had to get to humans at some point between, 20,000 years ago or so in order to reach South America. And they found the exact same variant in Neanderthal skulls from Siberia that were about 50,000 years old. They've also found it in Denisovans. So it is just this really interesting thing where you can sort of trace back that this probably originated in Denisovans, but it got passed around through several different human relatives before it got to us.
Following the snot trail through time. I love it.
Yeah, exactly.
Does everybody have this gene, or do only some people have this gene?
This particular variant of a gene is pretty specific to people in South America. The gene exists all over, but this variant is a little bit more specific. And the fact that it's common in South America, but nowhere else now, suggests that the people who took it with them to that continent, it got some kind of protective benefit from it that you didn't get for the people that stayed back in Asia.
If you have the variant of this gene, is your mucus different?
The study that I read did not say anything about how it necessarily made your mucus different, unfortunately. I was looking for that.
Standing by for that.
Yeah, standing by for
researchers. Okay, finally, something a bit more hopeful. News about a dwarf planet, formerly known as an asteroid, but now a dwarf planet, Ceres.
Yeah, so Ceres is the largest object in our solar system's asteroid belt. It's not big enough to be a planet. It's about a third of the width of Earth's moon. It's just this cold rock today. And back in the late teens, NASA's Dawn spacecraft found salt deposits on the surface that had been left behind from a time long, long ago when water had bubbled up from underground on this thing. And so there's a new study out now that is building on that work. So today, Ceres' water is only existing underground. It's these briny ice deposits. But the researchers ran computer simulations to try to understand what it might have been like billions of years ago. And 2.4 to 4 billion years ago, there was probably enough radioactive decay happening inside Ceres' core to generate heat, drive hydrothermal vents that brought the water up to the surface, and most importantly, create these kind of salty, wet mineral deposit soup places that life can potentially form. You know, something similar to what you find at hydrothermal vents on Earth's seafloor today.
So they found the conditions where life might arise. Do they have any other evidence that anything lived there?
No. So yeah, they found evidence that that those conditions could have existed, but no one knows whether life did take hold right now. Just that it's possible that Ceres could have had those right ingredients for life at one point. But this is interesting because it does add evidence that some of these other smaller, now cold moons that you find around places like Saturn or Uranus could have had the same history.
Thank you, Maggie.
Yeah, thank you.
Maggie Kurth, science writer and editor based in Minneapolis. After the break, looking beyond skin deep at some ancient tattoos. What can tattoos tell us about early humans? Stick and poke around.
I like that pun. I thought it was good.
Thank you. This is Science Friday from WNYC Studios.
119 weather update. Here's ABC 13 meteorologist Kevin Roth.
Afternoon and evening showers and thunderstorms. I've got the overall coverage today at 60%. that active stretch of weather, that active pattern sticking around, not just today, but into the holiday weekend as well. Saturday, a 70% chance for showers and storms. Sunday's a 60% chance. Even into Labor Day, that moisture still sticking around. That means elevated rain chances on Labor Day as well will finally dry out by Tuesday. I'm ABC 13 meteorologist Kevin Roth for News 88.7.
It's one thing to love public radio, but it's a special thing to support it. Consider this. If you've got a car you don't need anymore, or you've got one that's simply too expensive to repair, you can arrange to donate it to Houston Public Media. We take any kind of vehicle in any condition. It's easy for you, pickup is free, and it could be worth hundreds of dollars in support. Visit HoustonPublicMedia.org/cars to learn more. And thanks.
This is Science Friday. I'm Flora Lichtman. Last month, researchers used near-infrared photography to get a brand new, detailed look at human art from thousands of years ago. A beautiful scene of wild animals kind of tussled in a fight. But these weren't paintings on a cave wall or a rock somewhere. They were tattoos on the arm of an ancient Siberian woman who lived 2,300 years ago. Ancient tattoos may seem like an unconventional academic focus, which is why I love this story so much. So what can ancient ink tell us about our ancestors? A lot, according to my next guests. Here to stick and poke our way into this topic are Aaron Dieter Wolf, archaeologist for the Tennessee Division of Archaeology based in Nashville, and his research collaborator, Danny Ridet, a practicing tattoo artist based in Les Aisies, France. Welcome to you both to Science Friday.
Thank you so much, Flora. It's great to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a pleasure.
Okay, Aaron, let's start with you. Let's start with this new study on this ancient Siberian mummy. First of all, what did her tattoos look like? Can you describe them?
So this woman had a series of tattoos on both of her arms. Both of her forearms were tattooed with scenes of animals that, as you said, are tussling or engaged in fighting or battle. And then both of her hands also then have series of tattoos on them on the thumbs and across her first knuckles of her fingers.
I mean, I'm looking at it. It's so beautiful. First of all, I feel like anyone listening really should check it out. We're going to put it on our Instagram at Sci-Fi so you can see it. And it looks like three, I don't know, tigers? Would you say that? Sort of going after elk? How would you describe it?
Elk, deer, horse deer. You know, there's this this whole style of art has been called Scythian animal style. And one of the fun things about this has been that Danny, who has been collaborating with me for years on projects related to ancient tattooing, one of his practices is working in Scythian animal style art. He does a lot of work there. And so his knowledge and view of these pieces was really just incredible and I think really important to the process.
Well, Danny, you're a tattoo artist, and I know you've been collaborating with Aaron on this research for years. Do we know how they were made?
So our assessment that they were made via the hand poke tattooing technique, that is holding a sharp utensil made of one and or more needle points between the first few fingers and poking by a repetitive series of pricks. The tattooing implement dipped into pigment and then pricked into the skin.
And one of the cool things that Danny was able to identify by looking at these images is the presence of more than one tool, is that there are differences in the thicknesses of lines that shows us that they were not just using a single tool, but they had at least probably a single point tool for very fine line work, and then a bigger tool that was made out of a cluster of needles that was used then for larger lines.
Like a tattoo kit.
Exactly, like a tattoo kit. Yeah, people in the past, you know, they use different tools to create different designs. You know, the people that were doing this tattooing especially, they were not just one-offs. This was a generational practice. These people were craftspeople, and they had undoubtedly learned this through these, you know, long-term transmissions of knowledge going through generations.
Like any artist, probably.
Like any artist, absolutely.
Yeah. Aaron, how many academics focus on ancient tattoos?
Oh, I think there's at least 7 of us.
How did you get into this and why?
So I got my first tattoos when I was in graduate school. I went to graduate school to study Maya archaeology. And when studying the ancient Maya, one of the things that we've known about them for years is that they decorated and modified their bodies. They tattooed, they scarified their faces, they did all kinds of amazing things. So working at archaeological sites in Guatemala and Belize, we would find obsidian blades that we could intuit and understand were used for body modification, were used for bloodletting or tattooing. But in my research and in my work as an archaeologist in North America, I had never encountered a tool that I could confidently say was used for tattooing. And as I began to look into this a little more, I realized that this was actually the case all over the world. We know that ancient Egyptians tattooed, but we have no idea what tool they used. We know that Otzi the Iceman tattooed in the European Copper Age, but we had no idea what tool was used to do that. And so as an archaeologist, this really bothered me because what we're supposed to be doing out there is understanding culture of the past. And if we can't find these tools that are so important and are part of such an important process, well, it would be like not being able to find people's houses, right? How could we talk about the past if we couldn't find people's houses? And so I wanted to understand why we weren't finding these things and see if I could come up with convincing ways to identify them. There have been tattoo tools identified in the past in archaeological collections, but it's kind of been, oh, these look sharp and, maybe they were using them to tattoo. And mostly those identifications are made by people who weren't familiar with the practice and didn't have tattoos themselves. And I think that's been a big part of this process has been that working with Danny and working with other people who are tattooed and understand tattooing, that's a sea change from the analysis that's been done over the past century of tattoo tools and tattooed mummies. Because most of the people doing that work weren't themselves tattooed. They might have seen tattoos, but they hadn't gone through the experience and they didn't understand how these things actually worked at a physical level. And so I think that's been a huge difference in what we're able to bring to the table.
It's like an oversight, basically.
Yeah, it would be like trying to write about cooking without ever having eaten with a spoon.
Danny, you're a tattoo artist. Why do you care about the research side of this?
So I was trained as a traditional machine tattoo artist many years ago. And as I progressed as a professional tattoo artist, I kept finding that the older something was, the more interesting it was. A lot of my questions ended up leading towards how many traditional cultures were creating such intricate and outstanding works of art with such simple traditional tools. And it led me to completely abandon tattooing machines and pursue testing certain other implements on myself, like sharp rocks, cactus thorns, lemon tree thorns, and things like that. And as my questions about ancient tattooing gathered and mounted, I started trying to reach out towards people I thought might have the answers. And Aaron is at the top of that list.
Yeah. We met on Instagram, of all silliness. And so, yeah, we started talking. Oh, the Iceman, isn't it cool? He's got 61 tattoos. How are they done? We have no idea. How were tattoos made in the ancient Andes? Yeah, we have no idea.